The Tennessee Volunteers have just fired a football coach after a 3-victory season. So naturally, they're considering hiring a football coach off a 3-victory season. Hi everybody, I'm Marky Billson, and that's cutting PJ Fleck a little short. He and also Sonny Dykes, who is the head football coach at Southern Methodist, have now been linked to the Tennessee job, along with Clemson offensive coordinator Tony Elliott. But I want to talk to you a little bit about Fleck, and then we'll get to Dykes briefly. Fleck's the head coach of the Minnesota Golden Gophers, and yes, the Gophers were 3-4 last year. They lost a couple of games in overtime. Boy, what I would give for that record to be 3-2 again. I think college football overtime is just the worst, but nevertheless, they are, by our standards today, 3-4. It's not 1994 anymore. 11-2 though a year ago, which Minnesota had. They were 9-0 for the first time in I think it was 100 years or so. Which is a little surprising because Minnesota was at one time a great football powerhouse. And if you want to understand the hatred that SEC folk have for the Big Ten, you can look at Minnesota. They won the national championship in 1960. Their final record was 8-2. They lost the Rose Bowl. Ole Miss was undefeated. But in those times with pollsters, yeah, you can vote for whoever you want. And just ask 1993 Notre Dame, or for that matter, 1990 Georgia Tech, who has to settle for half a national title instead of the full one that they should have received. But no, nevertheless, what we are looking at is that Ole Miss was undefeated, but at that time, the SEC was racially segregated, and there was a lot of feeling at that time that the pollsters were holding it against the SEC for that practice. All right. I mean, you can say, hey, they were coming on the right side of history and such. Okay. I mean, no, it's a legitimate point. But this is where the SEC Big Ten hatred comes from and all this. And it also is very telling. Remember, 3 years ago, Greg Schiano wasn't good enough for the Tennessee Volunteers. No way, no how do we want Greg Schiano to be here, defensive coordinator of Ohio State. So does Tennessee hire defensive coordinator of Alabama. See, it's acceptable to hire the SEC coordinator at Tennessee, not so much the Big Ten coordinator. That's that divide again. You've got to get rid of that. You've got to look at good coaches wherever they come from. Do I think Fleck's a good coach? Yes, he's known for tearing down the culture that he inherits. For instance, he got his first head coaching job at Western Michigan a few years ago, about a decade ago or so. And the first thing he did was anyone who had a verbal commitment, hey, I'm not honoring this. Now, he later would say that I was hoping those people with the verbal commitments to Western Michigan would beg and plead and say, no, I want to play here, that was a test. But, Now, I will tell you this, that does sound pretty good to a Tennessee program where players are leaving left and right through the transfer portal after the demise of Jeremy Pruitt and with an impending probation coming up. The other thing is that he was criticized by his predecessor at Minnesota for really bringing down, the culture of the Minnesota Gophers, who had begun to win previously just before Fleck had gotten there. Now, not to 11-2, 9-0 points, but to 8-4 points. And that hadn't happened at Minnesota in quite some time. And so, he came in and really, attacked his predecessor with the players. It worked for him at least for a season. But again, now maybe that's what Tennessee needs, because I don't know if you really want to keep that Jeremy Pruitt mindset going over here. But those are some advantages for PJ Fleck. Here's the problem, though. Minnesota might just be a better job than Tennessee at this point. Now, I understand that this once would have been considered to be preposterous. I mean, in the 1990s, you would have, you're insane if you say that. But it's 2021. And here's the situation. If you come to Tennessee you got to beat out Florida and Georgia for the SEC East title, and then beat, let's say, Alabama, who's probably going to be, for the SEC West title. That is very daunting to win the SEC. You got to find a way to overcome not only Alabama, Florida, Georgia, but Texas A&M, Louisiana State, Auburn. If South Carolina and Missouri are good, Kentucky now has Stoops and, Mark Stoops. And so I would say that middle sector, if you will, of the SEC East after Georgia and Florida, Kentucky now might be the best football program in that division as we speak right now. But, I've often spoke of, since Vol's last SEC East title is 2007, every program that I think really is built to win a division title in the SEC East that really could, because, we can debate at Vanderbilt and Kentucky if it's ever really in the cards for them. But all the other ones, Missouri, South Carolina, certainly Florida and Georgia, they've all won a division title since Tennessee has. And it's something Tennessee fans don't like to say, that they're more in bed with Missouri and South Carolina than Alabama and Florida, but it's the gospel truth in today's day and age. Now consider winning at Minnesota these days. The Big Ten has, it used to be the Big Two and the Little Eight. Ohio State and Michigan and everybody else. Now it's Ohio State and everybody else. Michigan, Nebraska, Penn State, all down. Penn State 4-5 last year. And do you really think that any of those programs are about ready to challenge Ohio State? You talk about Tennessee losing to Florida every year. Do you realize that the Michigan record against Ohio State is actually worse? I think since 2005, Tennessee has beaten Florida once. Since 2004, Michigan has defeated Ohio State once. That really is amazing when you consider, how those two schools, Michigan and Ohio State, used to rule the Big Ten, but now it's all Ohio State. And that's, even Michigan State is down. Nebraska is over here, so why did we ever leave the Big 12 and all this? Penn State wants to say they're relevant. Yeah. None of those schools are really on the verge of competing with Ohio State on an annual basis, which is why you have Northwestern playing for Big Ten championships now. And it's why Minnesota, basically, you land the right quarterback, the right running back at Minnesota. All you got to do in your division is find a way to beat Iowa and Wisconsin, and I think that's easier than beating Georgia and Florida. And then there's that bold try at the Buckeyes. So that's the path to the Big Ten. SEC, there's that out of division. Are we playing Ole Miss this year, or are we playing LSU? I mean, it's a much tougher path. Now, the second thing is pay. P.J. Fleck makes $4.6 million annually at Minnesota. His contract lasts through 2026. Vols should be able to match that, but the question is, will they? Jeremy Pruitt was never paid $4 million a season to coach the Tennessee Volunteers. The Vols have been skimping lately, with the exception of Rick Barnes, in their coaching contracts. Will that continue? There's some people that say, well, they don't have to pay the Jeremy Pruitt buyout. That remains to be seen, because that's going to go to court and such. However, you're going to have to pay assistant coaching's buyouts, and those are quite pricey. $7 million if you let everybody from the current staff go. Remember, Jim Chaney was very highly paid. So if, whoever the coach is doesn't retain Chaney, okay. Buyout at Minnesota is $4.5 million. $4.5 million this year. It actually goes down. He's got a modest raise increase every year, but, do I think Tennessee could match that? Do I think they can give him a better contract? Yes, I do. The question is, will they? Because they haven't in recent times. Now, maybe Danny White's different. Who knows? But the other thing is job security. Like I said, Fleck's 3-4 last year at Minnesota, but nobody's got Fleck on a hot seat. Nobody's saying, what's wrong with Minnesota football right now? It would take several losing seasons for Fleck to really, boy, that row the boat is really growing thin now. It'd take a long time for that to happen up at Minnesota. But let's see the track record at Tennessee, who, despite, 8 losing seasons last 13 years, the fans still think they should be defeating Alabama and Georgia and Florida every year, and the record's been abysmal. I mean, it would be like Minnesota fans saying, we should win the Little Brown Jug every season. That's the way it is in Tennessee. So there's more pressure. But at Tennessee, a coach is he's fired all the time after a single losing season following a winning season. That's what happened to Jeremy Pruitt, Butch Jones, and Phil Fulmer. And those seasons were actually pretty good that they were coming off of. Johnny Majors and Bill Battle were both disposed of after winning seasons at Tennessee. Just didn't win enough. You're probably going to inherit probation, which is not making the Tennessee job as desirable as it may have been back in the Johnny Majors era or so. Last coach who did that was Derek Dooley. He got 3 years and then didn't get 3 years. He was fired before the end of the third season. So, yeah, that's a lot of pressure. You don't have that at Minnesota. You've got longevity and a multi-million-dollar contract. So let's say Tennessee comes and says, well, we'll give you $5 million a year. Well, that's $400,000 more a season than what you're making in Minnesota. You might be able to go back to Minnesota and say, can you match this? Yeah, we can. That sort of thing. You are likely only a losing season away from getting the axe after your first success. It's like what Dwayne Kuiper once said about hitting one home run in the major leagues. This is the problem with hitting one home run in the major leagues is that everybody expects you to hit a second one. Dwayne Kuiper is a former infielder for the Cleveland Indians of years ago who hit one home run, and I think it was a 12-year major league career. He was famous for it and all that. And yeah, after he hit well, can you do it again? No, I'm through. It's sort of like that. We have one winning season, we're expected to have another winning season. Yeah, but if you stub your toe along the way, Minnesota, you can go 3-4 after 11-2. Tennessee, hey, that was a fluke. Get rid of them. Both Minnesota and Tennessee are former football powerhouses. Minnesota's football record and tradition is pretty good. The problem is it's also pretty old. They were a powerhouse in the 1930s. I told you about the national championship they won in 1960. It's the last one they did. So when Fleck had the Golden Gophers finishing number 10 in the country in 2019. It was the first time they finished in the top 10 since 1962. So yeah, but they are former powerhouses that have fallen down. So we'll see. If Tennessee isn't willing to pay their coach, then that's a reason why Minnesota fell down. That's a reason why any football program falls down. They don't fund it well enough. Tennessee's got the wealth. Let's just see if they spend it. Now, the other coach that came out is Sonny Dykes. He's the head coach at SMU, and SMU has won 17 games over the past 2 seasons. That's the most games the Mustangs have won in back-to-back seasons since 1983-84. That's when they were about ready to go on the death penalty. That's pre-death penalty. That's just after Eric Dickerson and Craig James and the Pony Express and all that. Bobby Collins was the head coach then, this sort of thing. And yeah, SMU at one time was a very fine football program. They played in the Cowboys Stadium and all this, but that was a long time ago. And so Dykes has approached the levels, because SMU is not a nationally ranked program like they were back in those days, but the 17 victories, yeah, it's the most at SMU over a 2-year span since 1983-84, when they were paying the players and such, But here's the other thing about Dykes. He's more than a decade older than P.J. Fleck or Tony Elliott, the other coach linked to the job. Hey, no substitute for experience. Not the worst thing in the world. The question is energy. Are you, with the hip new thing then, et cetera, et cetera. He also used to be the coach at California, was 1-11 there. Admittedly, he built the program up after that, but yeah, that's 1-11, eh? He was Derek Dooley's successor at Louisiana Tech. How's that going to go over with the Tennessee fan base? Just something about Sonny Dykes that makes him seem like he's the candidate that'll get the job if the Tennessee Volunteers have to settle. Folks, I'm Marky Billson. The Vols are going to make a decision relatively quickly. Well, that's what we keep hearing. I ask you to follow me on YouTube. Hit the bell. You know what to do. Also, subscribe to my Medium channel. Listen to my Medium page. Just go Marky Billson Medium. Sign up for that. Get the updates, that sort of thing. Also, you're going to want to follow me on Twitter. Until next time, I'm Marky. Best analysis of the Tennessee Volunteers you're going to find anywhere.